Over the past months, there's been a lot of talk in the community about skilling, with forestry, the Duke mining thing, now shooting stars, and just the whole state of skilling. I want to start off this video by showing you this tweet from Edicon. Every skill should have a 20k XP per hour idle method. I don't see how this would harm competitive skillers or devalue 99s personally. Well, yes, this doesn't harm competitive skilling, but it does something else that I'll get to in a minute. And after that, the argument was made that players who genuinely hate training certain skills would now have a means to train it without training it, albeit at a crazy time cost. Which I reply to, I just don't understand this players who hate certain skills would now be able to train it mentality. If you hate or dislike doing something, then you don't do it. Nobody is forcing you to have level X in a certain skill. Which then was replied to, requirements for a lot of PvM are deep-rooted in skills. Players who want to experience the wider game are forced to train them to progress elsewhere. Well, this holds up to some extent. I actually then wanted to see where skills were actually hard required to complete content. And the first thing, of course, is quests. Like you need Desert Treasure 2 to do the bosses, or you need Song of the Elves to do the gauntlet. But after that I couldn't really find literal hard requirements outside of your combat skills for gear, etc. But I don't think training combat skills are the problem here. But then we also have certain skills that you need for raids, which are not required, but only help speed up the content very slightly in a couple rooms. We also have achievement diaries and skill cap perks that incentivize players to train their skills. But all of that is completely optional, but I will go more in depth on those at the end of the video. But in the tweet thread, the example was given for Song of the Elves requiring several level 70 skills to do it and essentially lock the content behind skilling. But if you have level 70 skill requirements for quests that are often boostable, and for reference, level 70 is 700k XP, which is also reduced again by the quest XP from other quests. Like you can pretty much get 70 agility from just XP rewards only. Just you don't even have to run a rooftop if you plan out your questing order a little bit. But if those really are the problem, I think we do have a bigger issue on our hands. And to figure that out, what that bigger problem is, I want to take a step back and look at what RuneScape really is, and why it appeals so much to us. I think the beauty of RuneScape lies in its endless possibilities and yet at the same time limited options. This allows you to craft your own personal path, but still have to work around some limitations. Like you can set yourself any goal in this game, but most of the time there are only a few ways to get there, and sometimes, well, most of the times, there's an obstacle in the way, and you just have to figure out how to deal with that obstacle to get to where you want to be. For example, let's say you want the Wilderness Elite Diary, so you can get noted bones from killing green dragons and free access to the resource area. So you go to the wiki and look up the requirements. And then you look at your stats and be like, oh, well, my mining definitely sucks, and smithing, thieving, fishing, and cooking really need some work as well. So you make a plan. Mining and smithing don't really have good AFK options, you realize, so I'll take those on when I'm actively playing this week, instead of raiding or PvPing. The last thieving levels I can probably get on a train to uni, just tapping the RD night. And fishing and cooking I can maybe do during some classes and when I want to watch a show before I go to bed. But then you get home on your first day and your buddies are like, hey Jim, you want to raid, bro? Me and Billy and Timmy are going to Chambers. But then you say like, no, sorry guys, going to try out some 3-tick gem mining today so I can get 85 mining for the diary I want to complete. So you go watch a couple videos on gem mining and start learning it. And after a week you got all the requirements and completed the diary, and now you can collect dragon bones more efficiently for your prayer training. And yeah, you had to spend a couple days doing something less fun than raiding with the boys, but at the end you feel good that you overcame the obstacles that stood in the way for the elite diary. But I believe that over the years we as a community have gotten too much say in shaping the game in certain aspects. that we have been trying to get around these limitations or obstacles with as little effort or possible, or sometimes even just completely flatten out the obstacles. If we don't like something in the game, we can suggest changes to JMods on Twitter and Reddit to smooth out our game experience. And before we all get angry, let me finish talking here. I do think real quality of life is very important in games, and that we are very blessed that we can work so close with the JMods. But on the other hand, when is it enough? Do we just keep smoothing out the game until nothing requires effort anymore and turn the game more into an idle game? But why is this discussion happening now all of a sudden? I think this is mainly caused by the majority of today's players seeing skilling as a means to an end. They just want to get to the fun stuff and see the skills as an inconvenience that stands between them and the fun content. Basically, they want the benefits of the skills without training them. Meanwhile, the 23 skills is what Oldschool Runescape is built on. And when you start adding ways to train your skills super AFK, hardly with any effort, even if they are super slow, you start to alter the basic fundamentals of what RuneScape is. You are removing all the decision making when it comes to account/skill progression, because now this new super AFK method has no friction or obstacle compared to the other ways of training the skill. So pretty much everybody will do this new super AFK thing to avoid actually interacting with the game, so that they can only get their high from doing what they enjoy. And I don't think it's a bad thing to add more options to train a skill. But again, when is it enough? How much can you bloat a skill with minigames and updates? Well, I can tell you, until you add one that is just so easy and little effort that nobody bothers to do the other methods anymore. I think that pretty much every skill is in a very good place right now and does not need a wider variety of content. And I'm saying wider here on purpose, as you have two ways of progression to a game or a skill in this case. Let's take mining, for example, as it's been talked about so much recently. The wider progression is that you have more ways of training the skill as your level goes up. But there's not really taller or vertical progression in pretty much any skill or method. You unlock a method, but the XP rate or the way how you do the method stays the same all the way until you do something else. Yeah, of course it gets slightly faster because your success rate goes up, but there's not really something you can do or unlock to go more in depth with the method. Of course there is tick manip, but I know that it's not for everyone, so I would like to see something different. And this idea I got from Sebe on one of his most recent videos. But it basically is expanding further on already existing content to give more depth. Sebe gave the example of Motherlode Mine and Blast Mine, where you could pimp out Motherlode Mine with a good amount of gold nuggets, so you actually have to do the content, so that you unlock new interesting ways of doing Motherlode Mine, and maybe some new buffs to make the XP per hour viable, to actually give some use to the place again after you went there for the outfit. And the same goes for Blast Mine. What if you could unlock certain things with a shop or point system that allowed you to excavate the walls quicker or give rare bonus blasted ores? And you might want to make the Blast Mine place instance, or the walls at least, because it's not very fun if there are 40 people. But this wouldn't just straight up be buffing the content, like saying, okay, Motherlode Mine is now 75k an hour and Blast Mine is 90k an hour. But it would give players more reason to keep doing it if you can keep unlocking little things to buff your XP or profit down the line. It also creates more routes for the player to consider, like, do I invest some time in a now slower method so I can reap the benefits later? And I would actually see those changes happen to the mechanics of the content itself to speed it up and make more fun, rather than just slapping an XP bonus on it just for the sake of XP up. Because the correct effort to XP ratio still needs to be there, in my opinion. But the idea in short is to incentivize the player to progress the method itself by unlocking new abilities in that method to result in faster and more fun gameplay and higher XP rates. And I think this is the route skilling should go down. Adding more depth and not more width to a skill. The importance, however, is that you can only gain those benefits by doing that exact method. Because if you start allowing buffs from outside the method, or even the skill, like skilling prayers or forestry teas, then you are convoluting the reward spaces of skills and tie skills to each other that shouldn't be tied together. Like needing 83 prayer for a special skilling prayer to get a 5% better success rate, and bringing a tea flask with an effect when you drink it that you automatically smell 10% of the ores while mining, is my worst nightmare for what could happen to this game. But I digress. I want to come back to this mentality thing with making everything more streamlined and smooth. I believe that this process of streamlining and automating is in a way human nature. I don't think I need to explain that, just like look around anywhere. We always want to go down the path of least resistance, if possible, and make things easier for ourselves. And back in the day, there were only a couple paths you could take to level a skill. So you chose one that you liked the most or had the least resistance for you. And those restrictions of only having a couple ways to train a skill made the achievement far more impressive. If you saw someone with a rare skill cape, you knew that person had put in the hours, because there was no easy way out back then. And if you came across a grind that was not fun or boring for you, then you either stuck with it until it was done, or just didn't do it and moved on to something else. But these days, players moan and complain about the slightest inconvenience until it gets changed. And I think the fact that we know we have the power to indirectly change the game is why we have pretty much gone soft mentally. And I saw this tweet last week, and it was probably the most accurate or realist thing I've seen in a while for this whole discussion. And I quote, "I swear 9-year-old players back in 2005 were mentally tougher than mid-20 to 30-year-olds today. You saw someone with a mining cape back then, and no one was crying about how it was too hard. You just respected the grind and acknowledged you weren't there yet." And I also went on a run with David Goggins the other day, and I asked him what he thought about the whole skilling discussion. And he had some words for those who were struggling.
"I've been thinking a lot. That internal voice has been talking to me. Talking about, oh man, you're tired. Looking at my
PC.
About 30 minutes before I put the motherfuckers on. Pushing back the time of that I
Go and log in.
So I decided to tape record myself. That internal voice I put on tape. Sounds like a straight bitch when I listen to that motherfucker. So if you ever have a hard time out there, tape yourself. Listen to what kind of bitch you're being. Stay hard."
All jokes aside, OSRS is still the grindiest game out there pretty much. And that is just what you have signed up for. And I hope it can still stay that way somehow. And I'm not saying here I suffered, so you should suffer too. But I am asking if it's right to change the core of the game to the liking of a new generation of players that just doesn't want to play the game anymore. Like, they want to progress, but they do not want to put in the effort. Like, I don't know. But then the argument comes out, yeah, but skilling isn't hard, so it doesn't matter if it gets easier. Well, if you say something along the lines of that, then sure, the actions performed aren't hard for you. But then another aspect of skilling or grinding is the hours required, which, if you say that, is maybe too hard for you, that the hours are too much. And that is almost the same as saying the marathon distance should be made shorter because running is not hard. Like, again, nobody is forced to get 99 in a skill. You can just stop training it when you want to do something else. But we also have the argument, I can't make significant progress while being a parent or while having a full-time job and other stuff. And I completely understand that. We as a player base have moved on in life and don't have as much free time anymore. But what we do have is plenty of good ways to still progress your account with relative low effort. And so I mainly think that this argument is just something you just have to accept that some things will just take longer when you can't play all day. And maybe you have to adjust your goals slightly to that. And I think the game should not cater to anyone depending on their free time. Either by adding giga AFK methods or only balancing around those who play all day. Both is wrong. There should be a middle way always. I think it's perfectly fine if the game is just there and we balance our goals and time investments to the game instead of the other way around. And if you can't, then maybe it is time to explore other games from time to time. And then lastly, we have the I don't want RSI argument. Yes, nobody wants that. That's why you stretch, take breaks, keep your wrist healthy, have a good setup, and good posture. I actually have a video on that if you need more info on that stuff, or else you can just read this tweet. But now, lastly, let's come back to those 4 things that require or interact with the skills. First, we had quests, raids, achievement diaries, and skill cap perks. Well, quests we talked about at the start. Level 70 skills are completely realistic to get, even with minimal effort. We are talking about at most 15 to 20 hours of training a skill. If that's too much, then RuneScape is just not the game for you. And I would say if people don't want to skill to do raids efficiently, then removing those skill requirements entirely from the content is perfectly fine. The content doesn't change or become significantly easier. Oh no, now I can do the same DPS at Guardians in Chambers as someone with 99 mining while having 60 mining. Who cares? Or Thieving Room being the same at level 50 as 99. The only thing that it does is it's making it more accessible for players to get into speedrunning the content, because otherwise they had to get 99 thieving first to even try. And also 90 herblore for the best overload is just stupid. You can already get it as a drop, so why don't you make it so that you have to use 3 Noxifer herbs instead of 1 at level 50? And then gradually you can use 2 at 75 and then 1 at level 90. And also have the success rate of the bruise and restore skill from level 50 to level 78. You just have to get a little bit more Buchu to make your potions. And then just get rid of the lower tier potions. And then we have the achievement diaries. I've heard many people say, yeah, the rewards are very nice, so I'm basically forced to skill and complete them. Well, okay, yes, they do have some nice quality of life, but none of them are required to do content. But we still have this weird interaction of feeling bad about doing certain content because you are missing a certain quality of life thing from a diary. A great example actually, is killing Giant Mole pre-Falador Heart diary. It's just not great, we all know that. But the Falador Heart diary requires you to do 15 hours of Monolod Mine for the outfit, 56 Runecraft and 72 Slayer. So essentially killing Giant Mole is locked behind 40 hours of skilling. So I would say instead of getting the skill requirements for the diaries easier to get, why don't we look at those rewards and say, should this be just normal quality of life for the content? And remove the reward from the diary. What if the Giant Mole already had this yellow arrow above its head? Maybe after you gave Wyson 5 mole claws and he gives you the ability to track down Giant Mole with some new item, I don't know. But that way you can still have the quality of life for the content, without feeling forced to train unrelated skills, and still having the achievement diaries there for those who want to complete them just for the sake of ticking off a box. I think doing this rebalance for all diaries will put them in a much healthier place in the game. And also, while we are reworking the diaries, can we please make the teleports unlocked per tier consistent? Still having 1 daily teleport on a hard tier and then unlimited elite is just weird, man. And then lastly, skilling cap perks. Most of these actually help the skill itself post 99, which is something most people who complain about skilling being slow and boring, they will just never do that. The only one I can see is the smithing cape, because the ability to have them function as a goldsmith gauntlets, so you can just wield the ice gloves, is pretty nice. So maybe we can do something that you can combine the ice gloves with the goldsmith gauntlets with some new mini quest or whatever. But other than that, they are just mainly for post 99 things. But then we have this goddamn max cape with all its perks, and that is something people do want, but they mostly don't want to put in the effort for. Yes, I know the game is overpowered, but it also serves as a nice endgame goal players can set themselves. And if you remember what I said at the beginning of this video, you can set yourself any goal in this game. But most of the time, there are only a few ways to get there, and sometimes, well, most of the time, there's an obstacle in the way, and you just have to figure out how to deal with it to get what you want. And that, in my opinion, is the beauty of RuneScape.
Stay hard.